if we can reference your past history, I think it's pretty far. I think you can get pretty far, Kiersten. You've been a champion for so long, and your reputation precedes you, and I'm very excited about your next chapter.
Thank you so much.
Not just for you, but for actually all of us. Because like all women philanthropists, your goal is always about somebody else, and
yes.
the greater good. So we're truly grateful. So it's noon. I'm happy to welcome everyone, especially our attendees who have hopped on early and have had a chance to kind of get a inside preview look at what is sure to be a fabulous conversation today. So truly grateful to all of you for spending, at least here in the Midwest, another gray, rainy day. So taking time out in the middle of your day to be with us. And I hope that, given that it's still January, all of you will allow me to say Happy New Year. I figure I can get till every last day in January, we're allowed to say Happy New Year. So Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you for starting the year off with WPI. We're excited to have all of you here with us. And so I hope some of you it might be lunchtime, and so you're grabbing a brown bag with us today, or some of you might be earlier on the West Coast, and so maybe you've got a cup of coffee in your hand. But whatever you're enjoying, I know that you're going to look forward to a wonderful and dynamic discussion. So we'll get started, and want to welcome all of you. I'm going to ask my good colleague Jackie to start a slide deck. I want to start off with just setting the stage for our conversation today, as we kind of go through trends that we're looking at here at WPI, but certainly that we're hearing in conversations that we're having with folks like you who are attending the webinar and other leaders in this field. So for those of you who I've not had a chance to meet, I am Jeannie Infante-Sager, and I have the distinct privilege of leading the Women's Philanthropy Institute at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy here at Indiana University. And we are so excited to welcome you to our first visual event of 2024. A few housekeeping notes. First, we have had such a great response to this event that we are actually using a Zoom webinar format. And so for those of you who joined us early, you were gracious to see us work through some of the details around that. It's a little bit different than just a meeting, which we normally do our virtual events on. So please use the Q&A function to submit any questions that you have for WPI or for our panelists, and we're going to be able to address those during the Q&A portion of our time together. Second, please note our social media handles and use them throughout this conversation and to keep the conversation going. We're going to drop links to those in the chat, but you can always use hashtag WPI Trends and hashtag Women's Philanthropy to join and extend the conversation on our social media handles. And so before we dig into these trends, I'm going to share a preview of our time together. Again, I'm going to start with a quick overview about the trends that we see ahead in women's philanthropy. And then I'm so excited to welcome our three esteemed guests to discuss. And we will make time for some Q&A. So please, please, please send those questions at any point during our time together. I know that our WPI community is not shy, so and are always interested in jumping into the conversation. So please, please, please do that. Let's make this as engaging and interactive and dynamic as possible on the Zoom. So let's jump in. How will the women's philanthropy transform in 2024? As we begin the new year, we have some familiar challenges and some new ones. We still see and experience challenges stemming from COVID-19 and the pandemic. We're in an election year, and we also see division and conflict all around us. These patterns and more will continue to influence philanthropy, including women's philanthropy. And WPI's research in recent years has touched many of these topics. We have explored how and to what causes women give. We have explored how elections influence women's giving. We did research on the impact of COVID on women's giving. We did a qualitative report last year on gender and racial justice, and there's so much more. But during our time today, we're going to be exploring the key question about how will women's philanthropy transform in 2024 and beyond. And we've identified these 5 key trends. So let's start with an obvious one. 2024 is a big election year, not just for the United States, but for significant democracies and nations around the world. And WPI's research shows that the election cycle can influence women's philanthropy, especially to specific causes that are relevant during the campaign season. And our research also shows that women tend to use all of their resources to create the change that they want to see in the world. In an election year, that might involve giving to charities or giving to 501c4s or to campaigns that reflect their values. It also might involve volunteering time or helping to influence others to vote or volunteer. And so while we know that this election year will influence women's philanthropy, we will have to wait to see the specific effects, whether this means increased political giving to female candidates or giving to reproductive rights organizations or some other influence. The second trend that will have a major influence in 2024 is unfortunately due to the global conflicts that we are seeing all around us. From the conflicts in the headlines, like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the war in Ukraine, to border clashes and internal instability in many developing nations, we know that women are disproportionately affected by such conflict. And at WPI, we recognize that women are on both the donor and the recipient side of philanthropy. Women and girls experience the impact of war, displacement, and the results of conflict like hunger, poverty, and more. At the same time, women are often leading the charge to address these issues, from donating money and time, to lobbying their political leadership, to please more, sitting at the negotiating table. And women are exerting their influence to resolve these conflicts. The third trend that WPI has identified is a long time coming. We know that climate change has already impacted our everyday lives. Many of us have already experienced the once-in-a-century storm or other extreme weather events. In fact, my own daughter was in Lahaina 2 hours before the fires came through in Maui. And so we know that this will influence philanthropy, not just in 2024, but for our long-term future. And as in the previous trend, again, we recognize that women are both donors and recipients of environmentally focused philanthropy. And again, women and girls are disproportionately affected by climate change and adverse environmental events. Giving to women and girls includes giving to environmental causes for this reason. And at the same time, women are leading the response to these issues as well. I just came back last week from a Women in Climate Innovation Lab hosted by the Nature Conservancy, where 40 women came together to really think through the how might we questions around climate change. And what I experienced in that small group, but certainly understanding this from a larger, broader perspective, we know that women are using all of their resources, donating money, volunteering, advocating for policy change, spreading the word, and so much more. Our last two trends are a bit broader. So gender equality and women's empowerment have been one of the Sustainable Development Goals, an SDG, since the SDGs were created. Feminist philanthropy as a concept has been around for decades. But that said, we see this as a major trend in 2024 and beyond, in part because of the mainstreaming of these conversations in the philanthropic space. A big part of this discussion is around definitions. What is feminist philanthropy? How do you express generosity through feminist philanthropy? We also know that while identity is important in philanthropy, giving to specific identities has been increasingly challenging. And we've seen that in recent Supreme Court decisions. We know that these legal decisions will impact philanthropy in 2024 and beyond. And we know that women are leading philanthropy for gender equity. But I do want to emphasize men as allies in these conversations and in this giving. Despite women's gains in all areas of society, we all go farther and faster with everyone's support, including men, with men's support and their influence on our behalf. The last trend I will want to share with you today is about the next generation of women's philanthropy. We often talk about the transfer of wealth that is taking place right now as we speak, from baby boomers to their children and their grandchildren. Women stand to inherit the majority of this wealth transfer. And we know from our research that this should mean good things for philanthropy, because when women have more money, women give more. Millennial and Gen Z women are moving into philanthropic leadership in so many areas. They are entering nonprofit leadership. They are leading policy discussions and running for office to impact society. They are giving informally by supporting family, friends, and neighbors, and so much more. And while women across the financial spectrum are leading in philanthropy, we are seeking leadership from ultra-wealthy women as well. And while Mackenzie Scott has been mentioned often in these big conversations, she is but one example of not only big giving, but giving in a unique way that reflects larger women's philanthropy trends like trust-based philanthropy. And at WPI, we know that philanthropy is led by women. And despite how women's contributions have been de-emphasized in the past, philanthropy and generosity have always been led by women. Given the rise of younger women donors and philanthropic leaders, we also know that the future of philanthropy is female. And that gives us hope for 2024 and the years to come, despite the challenges that we face. So with that brief overview of what WPI sees as 5 key trends in women's philanthropy going into 2024, and some food for thought for all of you in the audience to begin thinking about your own questions around these trends, I am so thrilled to introduce our panelists and kick off what I know is going to be a fabulous conversation. So let me introduce Elizabeth Barajas-Roman, President and CEO of the Women's Funding Network. Latanya Mapp Frett, President and CEO of Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. And I'll note, Latanya is in her second week at RPA after transitioning from leading the Global Fund for Women. And so we are excited to have her share with us during this time of transition. And our good friend, Kiersten Marek, founder of Philanthropy Women, and a true trailblazer and influencer in the women's philanthropy space. So welcome to all of you. Thank you again for finding a way to say yes to us. So appreciate it. So I want to start with a question for all of you. If you wouldn't mind just briefly introducing yourself, and in reflecting on women's philanthropy in recent years and looking ahead to the rest of 2024, how do you see these trends playing out? Is there one trend in particular that you see influencing women's giving this year and in the years to come? And I'll start with Kiersten. Kiersten?
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeannie. And thank you for that terrific overview. So thought-provoking. I'm I'm doing the captions so that I can make sure I've written it down and I can read it again. You know, this year is an election year, so I think we are going to see some heavy giving that crosses over that political boundary. People like Kat Taylor, who was a major Democratic donor in the 2020 elections, I think is going to be around and it's going to be very strong. And, you know, that sort of complements her philanthropy. So I think we're going to see a lot more of those crossover into politics givers who are going to really deploy their assets a little more in that direction this coming year.
Thank you. Latanya, do you want to jump in?
Hey, sure. Thanks so much. Jeannie, you said a lot of it, you know, and I am excited this year. I think, you know, there's 70 elections around the world, right? I mean, that's a hell of a lot of also women running, women participating and women voting. That's an opportunity, right? That's an opportunity for philanthropy. And a lot of times when we talk about philanthropy, we think of sort of the big, you know, mega billionaires, but actually women often give for schools, right, where their children are given for their communities and around these processes. Local elections is what I'm talking about. And so with these national elections, there's an opportunity to really focus on women in leadership, women in politics, and women supporting and voting, right? So this is, for me, a big year in thinking about how our giving shows up. Both in sort of resources, the actual checks, but also in the work that we do in the communities. As you know, I wrote Everyday Feminist. So I'm an equal supporter of actually, you know, checks going out the door as I am about the work that we have to do, the door knocking, the organizing, the mobilizing. And so for me, those are opportunities just as big as checks going out the door when we get together and get serious about what we care about and what we have to do. And so with that comes, and we've seen in the last couple of years, women really taking to the stage around climate, changing that conversation about the big C and emissions to what's happening at our local, you know, right there, you know, at our doorsteps, as you were saying. And so when we've seen philanthropists show up around those issues. And so I think that we're going to, now that this is an election year, we'll be out more, we'll be doing more of the mobilizing, that those issues around reproductive rights and climate, as you said, will be part of those conversations. And quite frankly, because we're frontiers in philanthropy, we'll think of new ways in order to continue resourcing these issues as they're needed. So that's the biggie for me. And all of that fits under the umbrella of feminist philanthropy. It's not new to gender equality, right? We've been giving, we've been doing, and this is the year that I think that us showing up is as important as ever with all of these national and local elections going on.
Thank you so much, Latanya. And just so you know, I was sharing with Latanya that on my stack of 2024 to be read by my bedside table is Latanya's book. So I am excited to dig into that. And thank you for adding your voice and your expertise in that way. So for any of our attendees out there, if you have a book in you about this, get it out. Get it out. We need more. We need more. So thank you for that. Elizabeth, same question. What's resonating for you in these trends?
Thank you. And thank you for, again, that thoughtful breakdown and sharing that research. You know, I think what's really interesting is that there's been, you know, so much built over the past 40 years in women's philanthropy, thinking about, you know, there has been an increase not only in women givers and how they give, but refining the practice of feminist philanthropy. You know, so it's not so much the definition, it's how feminist philanthropy has been evolving over the years to meet the challenges that we face around the world. And I think what's so critical at this time, and I think in many ways, feminist philanthropy is an idea that time has come, because right now, as we're thinking about, you know, philanthropy is so focused on data and thinking even about how we fold in AI to do faster and quicker analysis of what we know out there and how we're able to target giving. We actually see that, you know, feminist philanthropy can work right alongside, not only right alongside, is so necessary in that moment as a complement to even the latest technological advances around AI. You know, we need feminist philanthropy around the relationships, around how women give, you know, all of the different pieces around again, the relationships and what they know happens, happens in feminist philanthropy. The other piece around that is just, understanding that feminist philanthropy is about shifting power, right? You talk about the elections, you talk about all those different pieces. Feminist philanthropy is the idea, ultimately, it's a political idea, so in terms of thinking about what's new, what's the trend for 2024, I think what we're going to see is, again, feminist philanthropy as the idea whose time has come and was built for this moment. And I'm really excited to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I want to stay with you for a minute, Elizabeth. Given your role as CEO of the Women's Funding Network, as you just shared in the answer to that first question, your work really does touch on all of these trends. And so I mentioned our Women and Girls Index that shows that, again, less than 2% of charitable dollars go to women's and girls' causes here in the United States. So could you dig a little bit more deeply about how the Women's Funding Network defines these terms, again, feminist philanthropy and gender equity? I think that might be helpful for our audience to see how your organization kind of captures that as part of your mission. And then maybe a little bit more about, you started down this path, but a little bit more about how these definitions actually have changed over the Women's Funding Network's 40 years in this space. And then I'm going to give you the chance to share with us your thoughts about how can we grow giving to women's and girls' causes broadly, especially during this time when giving to certain identity groups is under increasing scrutiny.
Thank you for that. That was a lot, and so I'll try to go through the different pieces. Number one, as I mentioned before, feminist philanthropy isn't about the gender of the giver. And I think when you mentioned before about it includes men. Anyone could be a feminist. So feminist philanthropy isn't about the gender of the giver. It refers to the strategic approach to philanthropy that includes a gender lens, that includes a gender analysis, that includes an analysis of power, right, and how power shifts. It includes leveraging financial resources, influence, advocacy to shift a system to be more equal. And it also includes centering marginalized communities, right? So, and lifting those voices up. So it's that approach that can be, again, be any gender, but it does have a special influence, focus on specifically those most impacted. So you talk about the how we can grow this, right? We know that in many ways it's had a lot more, people are talking about it more people are able to think about it out in the open and openly even say feminist when they're in a room. We have a book, Everyday Feminist, and we're leaning into that. How do we then translate that into the kind of transformation that we know is at our doorstep? And I think what is also really positive to think about is that any foundation, any giver can be a feminist giver. And I know Latanya is going to talk more about this. But in terms of foundation organizations, it really does take that first kind of step around the commitment around the top. How are you going to bring this into your strategy? And then it does think about, are you doing a gender analysis? I mean, you don't have to necessarily have a portfolio that says, gender, gender on it, or women and girls. But are you bringing a gender analysis to the grants that you are making? We definitely want that 2% to change to, add 20%. Can we talk about 50, 51? But we also understand that the data, we need to be better about how we're disaggregating this data that we have, so we can capture more of the ways that foundations and givers are moving dollars to women and girls, because we really want people to see themselves and they want to see their approaches reflected in this as well. But again, it's the questions that foundations and donors can ask themselves. Are you, number one, committed to this? Are you, number two, bringing in the existing data into the work that you're doing? Are you looking at the impact your grants and your giving is having on gender? You know, if that is not something you are actually looking at, you're not doing it. Let's just say there, it's not kind of, sort of, you're not doing it. And so, you know, there's so many wonderful organizations that can help, and I don't know how many toolkits that are out there. There's so many ways you can do it. Just start doing it, and you might be surprised. What you think you're good at, you may actually find some room for improvement. So we encourage people, as they're thinking about how we can grow this 2%. It seems so intractable, but there actually are ways people can start doing it now. Again, number one, have that commitment. Number two, look at the data. Are you making that? Are you intentionally thinking about the impact on gender and gender equity that your grants are making? And then, you know, Noah, you just described about mainstreaming. You know, bring it into every single grant, right? Add this as a component. Be explicit about the impact that your grant making is having on gender. Yeah, and so, you know, the last thing I would recommend is, again, fostering the collaboration. We talked about this is about relationships. This is about collaboration. You know, places like WFN, other places where you can have these relationships with other funders and donors who are trying to think about this, who are doing something about it, who are making those steps. Get into that formation now. You know, that's the other thing. Is just, you can do that now. It's and start again working with your peers to do that.
Well, it's that awareness and intentionality, and the work at the Women's Funding Network and what you just shared also reveals some characteristics of the research that we have at WPI that says that women like to give collectively, right? And so they like to talk about their giving. They like to strategize with each other. And so how are you as an individual or as a larger funder kind of thinking through that in more strategic and intentional ways and building on those relationships? So thank you for sharing a little bit more about that. And it's why wanting to move the needle on that less than 2%. And we were stunned to learn at WPI that there wasn't already a giving community around giving to women and girls, which is why we, with Anchor Partners, spearheaded the first Give to Women and Girls Day 2 years ago, because quite frankly, the folks who've been following WGI closely just got frustrated with this less than 2% number. So really thinking through intentional ways to increase funding and direct more funding to women and women-led initiatives. So thank you for that. I want to continue kind of on this thread and call on Latanya. And you're really in a unique position after wrapping up your time leading the Global Fund for Women and now entering into your new role at Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. And I imagine, in fact, I know that your time at the fund, you know, it might have focused on giving to women and girls, which touches on several of the trends that we are discussing, certainly climate change, certainly gender equity. And now at RPA, you'll be focused more on donors and supporting them on their philanthropic journey. So I just think you're in this really amazing and unique opportunity during this transition to maybe share with us from both these perspectives about these trends and how you think women's philanthropy will evolve in the coming year. And knowing where your heart is in this, you may have some things to actually contribute to what Elizabeth just shared. So feel free to share with us.
Absolutely. I'll definitely build on what Elizabeth is saying. We're kindred spirits, so that makes it a little bit easier. And I will say, you know, the old adage your parents probably said is be careful what you ask for. So I come into Rockefeller Philanthropy's advisors, you know, RPA, with the understanding that for my own beliefs around feminist philanthropy, is actually also a lot about how resource partners act at the table, right? What kind of partnership, what kind of relationship is this? And for many of you who know Global Fund for Women, we've really kind of seeded a movement led, so speaking of activist partners actually advising resource partners as to what that should look like. I think gone is the day, and maybe in 2024, we'll see the end of it, where, the philanthropist or the resource partner decides on the strategy across many sectors, right? Because I saw the question around cross sectors. And then going out and looking for a partner that will satisfy that strategy. I think we're much more leaning into a situation where we're in relationship, especially younger donors, especially women donors, thinking about how that relationship looks and feels is very important. It's not a top-down approach. It is much more of a situation where if you're living it and you're doing the work and you know it, then it means that the resource partners should yield in many cases to what you think is important in order to meet the success and impact that we're all looking for in social change, right? And so I know in feminist philanthropy, building off of what Elizabeth said, but it's going to be very important that we look at long-term relationships. This stuff can't get done in a 1 to 3 year cycle, right? We know we have to ensure that it's flexible. To that question about whether if it starts as something that you're really focused on the reproductive rights side, but there is a year like this one where where political leadership is very important, being able to pivot, be agile around that funding. And then, of course, core funding. Gone are the days where NGOs should not pay themselves, right? We want to make sure that not only are they well, but they're also thriving, right? That they're able to actually do this work for a long period of time and not burn out and miss the opportunities of local activists sometimes do because we just put so much burden on them. And so I wanted to bring up those because I think it's core, Jeannie, and I know Elizabeth spoke to them, but they're very specific things that we have to increase. And, in the world that I lived in, it was very common to say these things. The world that I am, I look forward to supporting the work of resource partners and philanthropies to be able to trust the grants that they're making and to be able to make them in a way that allows long-term flexible core grants to their partners. But I also want to say just before I finish up, as we move into this year in 2024, I want to be careful of sort of the going after I don't know what they call it, but the golden carrot, whatever is new and sexy today, because I think it goes to the long-term relationships that we hold. I think it's very important to have a diversified portfolio. And I heard Elizabeth talking a little bit about this, but we need to think about our long-term relationships and not just, sort of cut them off and to run for this new thing that might be good this year, but to actually evolve with them and talk with them about, because, organizations really often will work in many veins in order to support their communities. And I think it's important that as resource partners, we help them kind of look at that and analyze that where they are the most useful, and not say, we're not funding you because you're a higher education organization, but we're gonna fund this one over here for climate. But to really kind of dig into those relationships and understand where we can make the difference from wherever we sit. And so with a diversified portfolio, I always talk about you've got your, more than 50% the way we do our money, right? And probably in some kind of safe cash bet long-term. But then we also go and look for, on the other side of that, new startups, emerging movements who are thinking about doing this work, who have been out, out in the public, expressing maybe problems with the way things have been working, the old way of things, and have a new approach. And we should have some of our funding in that as well. So those are two things that I'm kind of grappling with in the new job, is like how to be supportive of resource partners, but also respecting and understanding these tenets of feminist philanthropy that I've learned along the way. Thanks, Jeannie.
Thank you. And a question came up in the Q&A that I just want to bring up now while we're talking about resource partners. So I think there is a little confusion about what a resource partner is. We use different terms for all these things. Yes. And so the question was about, speak more to the role of the resource partner? Who do these people tend to be? Where are they located? How are they compensated? When you say resource partner, you're saying donor, right?
Yes.
Whether
I
it's
just don't like donors. And to be honest with you, having worked across, so I used to be at the UN, I used to be in the US government, and now I'm in, and just left the NGO world when I was with Planned Parenthood, went into a feminist fund, and now I'm with RPA. We all use this different language. And first of all, I want to emphasize the partnership, which is why I use the language resource partnerships, because it's usually the people who bring the dollars and cents, or pounds, wherever you are, to the table. And that is why I'm saying resource partners, because a donor in some ways distorts the relationship. So I want to be fairly clear about the fact that resource partners come from all over. And your resource may be money, and that's usually what we're talking about, but others' resources may be something different, their time, their space. And so I wanted to be clear that we're all equal at the table. There's an equity that sits there, and your dollars are no more weightier than the time of the person that you're using those dollars for. So we're the resource partners who bring the money, but also who bring the time and the energy towards the work that needs to get done.
Thank you so much for shining a light on that, because I will say it's similar for us when we use the word philanthropy, and it's in our title, right? Women's Philanthropy Institute. Women aren't necessarily drawn to that term or that identity because it's so wrapped up in money. What women are drawn to is this understanding of generosity and this collaboration. And so kind of meeting people where they are. And some of the things that you shared that really stood out for me is this tension between survive and thrive. And I have met with so many executive directors of women's and girls organizations who say, Jeannie, we actually do very well in finding resource partners for this work. The issue is what they're supporting are programs where we are that just allow our women and girls to survive in the system, in the systems that they've been born into. And they dream of what would it be like if we could invest that same amount of money into programs so we can see women and girls thrive. So it's that survive, thrive piece. So thank you for helping clarify and promote the term resource partner and really digging deep into that. Kiersten, I want to throw it to you and bring your voice to the conversation. Again, at Philanthropy Women, you've documented research and trends in gender and giving for years, truly from a place of passion and heart. This is not a money-making.
Unfortunately not.
Philanthropy Women. It is blood and sweat and tears on your part. So want to
I'd love to talk a little.
What are the trends that we've identified that ring true for you? How do you see them intersecting with one another? And what you've been seeing in the world as you've been observing and helping us curate this space for so long.
I like the idea you spoke to of the language and how the language is changing. And, my book is called Feminist Giving, Creating New Frontiers in Social Change. Feminist giving, I didn't want to really use the word philanthropy either, because I'm kind of tired of it. It really needs to kind of drift off because it represents a very top-down culture ultimately. So I'll just start with that and say, if you asked the question, Jeannie, how can we grow this giving? And I can only say we have to have a much stronger media sector covering it. That's one huge way we could grow it. But no one wants to fund it. And really, no one wants to be associated with it. So there are these huge barriers to it. And I kind of have some sense of how small just the philanthropy media sector is. But I really got a strong taste of it when I wrote and published and publicized my own book. Because, I put the book out, I did some, I got it into a lot of libraries, got it at Harvard Bookstore, got it at a lot of great bookstores. And it sold somewhat. But I really thought when I got reviews in publications like Candid and Alliance Magazine, I would sell more books. And that is not the case. So you can write an absolutely, huge book on this topic and think you're going to get all the people in philanthropy to buy it and read it. I don't know what to tell you. There's a real gap there, and I alone can't fill it. I was really hoping to expand my career in the direction of publishing, and that may still happen. I'm now in an executive MBA program to try to figure this question out and see if there is a path for me as a publisher in this arena. But, my funders wanted to come on for 1 to 3 years. Many of them got so burned out in those years that they didn't want to have anything more to do with philanthropy. They wanted to move strictly into political funding. So, it's hard work to stick with. I am graced by the fact that my husband retired this year, and now he is volunteering his labor hours to write our content because I have returned to work full time. I was working full time before, but now I work overtime as well. So, I think there's a lot of talk and not a lot of action. And I know the Women's Philanthropy Institute really brought wonderful attention to that with their Say-Do Gap report on racial giving. And I think there could be another report that speaks to that same say-do gap in the women, giving for women, and caring about knowing who the real players are in the women's philanthropy sector.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kiersten. Elizabeth, at WPI, again, we often talk about women giving broadly, women giving collectively, and women giving holistically. And I think, again, I try to demonstrate how these concepts kind of underlie all of the trends that we've discussed today. Maybe looking at the Q&A and thinking about what folks are interested in the audience, I think they would appreciate hearing a little bit more about how we're seeing women using all their areas of influence, not just money, but time and advocacy, social capital, and more. Can you share maybe some examples, or certainly some of the things that you're talking about from the Women's Funding Network about how we lean into what Latanya is saying, all of our resources, and how we can appreciate them and lift those up?
Sure, absolutely. So it's not a it's not a secret that women and women's bodies and women's choices in the U.S. are at the crosshairs of the moment we're in right now. So when you think about how women are giving, or how feminists, I want to say feminist philanthropy, how feminists are giving, and thinking about the intersections that are impacting women and women identified people in the U.S. Today, we're talking, bodily autonomy, we're talking trans rights, we're talking education, every aspect of a woman's life right now is being dramatically impacted right now. And so, thinking about all of those different ways that feminist givers, women givers, move dollars and resources, all of it is needed. Again, it's not one thing, as Latanya mentioned, not one thing is kind of elevated over the other. We need on the ground networks of mutual aid. We need collective giving circles to come together, resource the organizations that they know personally. Again, because that's the kind of information that a larger national foundation wouldn't know. We need every single level, the full infrastructure, to be strong and moving forward. Another piece that we're seeing that is again coming to bear is thinking about, and that has moved quickly, again with pivoting and moving quickly, is thinking about advocacy. That's we talk about the political moment, but advocacy is another place where women's funds on the ground have been active, for decades. Where philanthropy as a whole has kind of stand on the sidelines a little bit, kind of a little more hesitant. I would say look to your local women's fund. Look to these funds who are already engaged at the local level, at the state level, and partner with them. If you can't do something directly yourself, maybe you can do something in partnership, move dollars through them. There's ways that you can have a on the ground partner with issues that are impacting the populations that you serve in your community. So I think what we're seeing is, again, there's infrastructure there. It has been built, but to your point around the 2%, it is there, but it is also in desperate need of additional reinforcements, right? So I think, thinking about how you're reinforcing that, also how you're partnering with it, I think is really important. One of the things that Latanya actually worked with us on last year was about thinking about bringing those ties between the global and global, national, and local policy making together. How do we string all the way up and all the way back down? This is about feminist foreign policy, at the kind of global level. This is about national talking points and things that are impacting women and girls at that place, and also thinking about what's happening at the state level, and how are we making the channels so that that information and that data moves quickly up and down the ladder as we are experiencing change at the pace of change, right? That information is flowing at the pace of change. Another way that we're trying to, again, move at this moment is thinking about the data, right? How are we disaggregating this so that it can be useful to everyone who's looking to create change? Right now the WFN is working with Candid directly to see how we can help provide some tools for givers, for nonprofits, for anyone working in this space to be able to pull down some disaggregated data. So again, those are things that are, again, tangible examples of how we are addressing the moment. But again, I think I can give you examples of all the great achievements, right? As examples of how. What I think is really important now is thinking about who are the partners to create the achievements of 2024. Right, we're in January. There are so many opportunities available to all of us. And I think what's important is saying, link arm in arm with the doers, right? Link arm in arm with the your local women's fund, your partners that are in feminist philanthropy, and get to doing this year. This is the time. And so again, I think along those different lines, again, there's collaborative, there's policy initiatives, there's thinking about board diversity and who you're hiring, right? Who you're hiring to lead the work of a foundation or the work that you're doing. Again, there's a wide variety of opportunities to move now and have an impact.
Yeah, you bring up a great issue that we see. So we know from some of our qualitative research that women are really interested in educating themselves before giving, but we don't want that to be to create donor paralysis, right? I think we can all remember a time where we kind of stayed back because we just wanted to know more. We didn't want to make a mistake. We wanted to do the best that we can. But I love this line, find the doers. It kind of reminds me of Mr. Rogers, find the helpers. Right. When you're sitting in a moment of crisis or question, ask yourself who are the doers, and find them and just give. I hope that what I hope for the research that we have at WPI with regards to women as donors, that it does help them build confidence to just do, that there isn't a right way or a wrong way to do this. And in fact, the way that you're doing it aligns with so many other women and who identify and women and folks who identify as women want to do it. So just do. So we may have a tagline there, Elizabeth. I think we might have something there. I want to bring this back to money, though. So I'm going to talk to Latanya and thinking about the final trend that we mentioned in this rise of younger women potential resource partners, right? The way as I shared earlier, the way we see it at WPI, the future of philanthropy is female. And so as you think about 2024 and beyond, how can these younger women grow into these philanthropic powerhouses that we know that they are capable of being? And I've seen lots of questions come through the Q&A about how can nonprofits and fundraisers best engage them in this philanthropic journey, which may be new-ish in this form to them, certainly not new in terms of how they're showing up in generosity.
And we love money. Let me just make sure we're all on the same page. Organizations needed to do this work, this hard work, right? So it's interesting because, I was just talking to and getting to learn at RPA and talking to associates. The thing they love the best is the research with each philanthropy they work with, right? So when they work with these partners who are looking for organizations to fund, I like the way, just find the doers, because many of them, they're not doing like Google searches. Of course, they're going through their networks. And one of them said that one of the first things that usually she would do, and it didn't matter the sector, was go to the Global Fund for Women, especially around people who want to fund internationally and don't know who's out there. And she would go to the grantee partners of Global Fund for Women and look through and see if there was a match. Because it was a trusted intermediary, because they knew the kind of work that these feminist organizations were doing and wanted to include them in a list that they offered to the clients. And I just love that, because it's not rocket science. They're out there, just because you don't know them, there are lots of people out there doing some really, really good work. And I personally, and Elizabeth knows this, am really committed to this role of finding activists and NGO organizations and not putting the onus on them to find us who fund. I think it's super important. And, even we need to rate, ourselves. We need to rate donors the way we rate, the organizations, that the due diligence that we do on that side, we need to do on the resource partner side as well. Because I think for me, 2024 and beyond, it is about how we look for and find these organizations when they need us the most. Once they get to a stage where they have staff that can look for grants and apply for RFPs and things like that, sure, that's a place for some foundations, even maybe large government donors. But for the most part, the type of small local organizations that we're talking about, when they're in the mix of it, and let me say this year with 70 elections, they're going to be in the mix of it. We have to do the work of getting out there and finding them. And this is the kind of work that RPA certainly wants to do with partners who want to look at how their philanthropy can be more impactful. And it's the kind of work we do. So you don't have to do it alone. There's going to be a lot of us out here that are going to help support you in that journey to figure out where, both domestically and globally, you can put your resources around organizations that you feel most passionate about. And so, I have to just give a couple of examples, right? Because we're talking about young donors who, this is how they're going to do things. They're not necessarily going to be by the sidelines. They're not going to be starting big foundations with their wealth, with all of this infrastructure. They're going to be mostly interested in being a part of, as you said, collaboratives and collectives that are doing this work, and get advice from the networks that they're in. And so what we're seeing is, in the examples that I'll offer, is like the Black Feminist Fund. This is an organization that lives at a very specific sector of intersection for work. I mean, you talked about the 2%, it's half that when you're talking about women organizations led by women of color. And right. So, Black Feminist Fund is very specific in trying to change that, right? And I think you're going to see more of that, and very, very both young resources as well as activists who are coming together to make that happen at that intersection. One of the first things I did at Global Fund for Women was a strategic partnership with Spark, who, pre-COVID, used to meet in person with young, quote unquote, philanthropists who wanted to not just give a check, but also be involved in what the selection of the organizations and get to know them, and to be in partnership with them, either traveling to be with them if they were global or outside of their own state. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, that the way that it looks to sit at the table in partnership is very different for younger philanthropists. And as we see this changeover, I think there will be less interest in sort of the more egocentric, building of foundations, and infrastructure, and more about being in partnership around the table and making decisions that benefit not just other resources, but also activists together at the same time. So I bring both of those up because I think we're starting to see new models emerge, and that with the younger donors, we'll call them, coming to the table, I think we'll see a new way of experiencing how we work together.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When we met to plan for this event, I looked at these 5 trends, as you might recall, and I said, well, it feels like the world is on fire. When we see war and conflict, when we anticipate the coming election season and all of the drama that's going to be around that, when we think about climate change, it can get overwhelming and hard to find hope. So we've got 5 minutes left. Let's find some hope together. Kiersten, what makes you hopeful about women's philanthropy in 2024? How can philanthropy continue to inspire us?
I think that what makes me hopeful is the expanded definition that we've all talked about today, where relationships are really becoming more core to us, and therefore other things can happen. I'll talk personally that my husband retired from a corporate job in 30 years, and now he's writing for me. That gives me hope because he knows this is important, and he has more time now, and he will help. And we have to find those people wherever they are. And sometimes they're right nearby and we didn't even know. And, so I think that gives me hope. It also gives me hope that there is this expanded definition and of getting more to talk about gender equality rather than talking about it as feminism. I think we are evolving to a place where gender is going to be less of an important variable in who you are in your identity. We have non-binary people who now are present with us and are offering us these alternative visions of what life can be. And so I think that makes me very hopeful about women's philanthropy, that is one of the core things I feel, is that the women's philanthropy is bringing in as many diverse groups and anything that hasn't gotten the attention it's needed. And I see that as becoming a more powerful trend going forward.
Thanks so much, Kiersten. Elizabeth, what makes you hopeful?
Thank you. I know you mentioned about being on fire, and I shared it in our prep call. I think what makes me really hopeful is the cavalry is coming, right? Where we are, it's been 40 years building what this infrastructure is, all the different layers, all the different ways. There are leaders in this movement in every single sector. It gives me so much hope to open the door or to have a meeting with someone, and it's like, yes, it's a woman of color, or yes, it's a woman who identifies in a very expansive way around thinking about power. We are everywhere, and I think it's those the fact that we are holding those positions. Latanya is in this great position. We are moving and shaking and doing. And I believe that that's how we will win, right? I believe that's how it's the power that we've created over the past 40 years. We can't lose hope. We need to dig in. This is the moment, and we're ready. So I think what gives me hope is all of these the strength of the leaders we have, the strength of the leaders of tomorrow. I want to say the young women, or the people who are born today, 1/30/2024. Those are the seeds that are coming up and are going to be our leaders of tomorrow. I absolutely no doubt. So again, that's what brings me hope, and I'm really excited to be in the trenches with you all.
Elizabeth, thank you for helping lead the cavalry. We're truly, truly grateful. Latanya, what makes you hopeful about women's philanthropy in 2024 and beyond?
Agreed. I'm sitting in this panel with 3 amazing women. So I agree with Elizabeth that we are showing up in spaces where we need to be. And so I am really, really confident around the way that things are moving. The way that I think, organizations are trying really hard to find each other. In the past, that power dynamic that Elizabeth talked about earlier meant that things were just going one way, and we're living in a very complicated and complex time. So many issues that we have to encounter and work on at once that I feel like communication has made it easier. So we're knowing each other better, both globally, but nationally and locally. So we're getting connected in ways maybe that we hadn't been before. And I think we're starting to see the fruit of that. And I am so inspired by the ability to have folks sit together and come up with solutions to the challenges that we face. And I'm not talking about, men or women. I'm talking about all of us together around these issues. And so I'm just as pleased by, when I go to my book talks, that there's, men in the room also who certainly, consider themselves in this framing around feminist philanthropy, and who completely understand the challenge we have in front of us, and how we get there is not going to be in any siloed, organizational way. It's going to be all of us playing together, whether you come with the finances, or whether you come with other resources, whether you're intermediaries, advisors, and others, who all of us have a role in the world that we want to create, and who I believe we're going to be able to get through because we're doing it together and not separately.
Here, here. Thank you so much, Latanya. You are absolutely right. I mean, the tables look different. And I can't thank everyone enough for staying with us through the hour. I also want to thank everyone for submitting your questions. We got a lot of questions, and so I know we didn't get to all of them, but please look out for our follow-up email which will go to everybody who's registered, and we'll include the recording of the session. And we'll also look through those unanswered questions to see if there are answers and resources that we can provide. So this is just the beginning. My goodness, from the questions that I've read, and from the inspiration that you have sparked for me in this conversation, we could have an entire year of planning out of this. Actually, people are leaning in a different way. And so I want to thank Kiersten and Latanya and Elizabeth for kicking us off for what's going to be a great year. So thank you all to all of our attendees who are joining us, and let's stay in touch. Find the doers. There were 3 in conversation with us. So thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, Jeannie. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.